So I wonder if the explosion of the stadium is going to go down as Burning PT Moment 37. Hello everybody, welcome back to Super Robot Wars Original Generations. We are now in Scenario 2 of the Ryusei route. Before we get too deep into this map though, we best go over our main character. Ryusei is a character that mostly focuses on melee. That's his best stat. He also has a very high evasion stat, so those are the two things that you're going to be focusing mostly with Ryusei. He also combines that with a pretty solid skill stat. Not the best defense, but good enough, and solid enough accuracy, with a good amount of SP. He's not going to have the most, which is a little bit unfortunate, but he does have a good amount. The only thing he's going to be lacking a little bit in is his range stat, but it's going to be a little bit better than other characters that are similar to him that are so focused on melee. With that being said, Ryusei as a melee-focused unit, especially as a main character in the Super Robot Wars series, certainly is a little bit below the usual standard. He's not going to be the unit that's going to be your do-or-die, he's going to be your one that's getting, 12 kills per map or anything like that. He certainly can be that way with enough favoritism and setting him up in certain ways, but especially in the beginning here of the Ryusei route, he's not going to have a mech that really fits his style. And even once he gets his personal mech's best attack is a one-range only attack, and so that really limits his range potential, and certainly limits how good he can be, especially on an enemy phase, if he can only really counterattack with his best attack at one range. So those are some little minor things that Ryusei has. Ryusei though does get better as the game goes on, which I think is very fitting for his character. He starts out with some limited range and his mech isn't as powerful as it could be. It does get an additional upgrade later, and then an additional upgrade if you're on Ryusei route. And so there's some other little things too. Ryusei and the rest of the SRX team that we'll meet very shortly do get a combo attack later on in the game, so that can definitely be useful for them. But just overall, Ryusei, and one other thing mentioning the SRX team, Ryusei has a bunch of relationships which you can use to help better his stats as well. He's got a rival with Rai, who we're going to meet in the next map, and so that stays for quite a while, and so you can use that in the early game maps to get some guaranteed crits. You also have those friendship levels with the rest of the SRX team, which you can use throughout the game. And then he has a rival level 2 with Kyosuke, who is the main character of the other route. That stays throughout the whole game. So you can use that together, use them kind of as a duo, and get some really good high crit out of them, get some consistent crit through that. Looking at his spirit list, that's one of Ryusei's main strengths, at least at first. He starts with Focus, which is really nice. He's going to get Persist here in just a level. Persist is one of the most useful spirits, or one of the more useful spirits in the game. He also gets Bullseye in a few levels as well. So the fact that he gets those three spirits as three of the best spirits and most consistent spirits in the game is very useful for him. Later on, he's going to get access to Luck. Luck's okay. The one issue is that on Ryusei route, there's going to be a character that will be able to grant luck to anybody through the use of the spirit called Bless, and so him having it, especially at how expensive it is, you're not going to be using it a whole lot because you're just not going to have a lot of opportunities where it's really going to be fiscally worth using, at least in terms of your spirit list, and money's pretty abundant in the early game of Ryusei route. Valor early at level 23, we certainly like to see that, and then he gets Zeal very late into the game. Zeal is a great spirit, it's so high cost. It's a 70 cost for him at base. He's not going to be able to use that, even if he had it right now, he's not going to be able to use that for a number of levels, and even once he gets it, most characters, their SP levels out at about the high 120s, and so he's not going to be able to use it and do 2 big damages to a boss, which is where you're really going to be wanting to use Zeal, so that's one minor issue. However, if Zeal is most useful on a unit that is in a multi-seater unit, like the Getter Robo, so that in theory, he could use Zeal, and then the other pilots in his duo could use Valor, Bullseye, Persist to attack a boss. And then you get 2 attacks off of a really great unit. So that's in theory something you could do with Ryusei there, a wink wink nudge nudge. And then looking at his skills, he comes with Telekinesis and Potential. Telekinesis is really good. At each level you get a boost to your accuracy and evasion. Evasion helps him out a lot, really fills out his great evasion stat and helps him become a really good dodge tank, and so that's something really nice. And the accuracy certainly is not something you're going to accept. His potential is good, or by potential I mean the skill potential, pardon me. is a really good skill. It's kind of like Resolve in Fire Emblem. The lower your HP, and depending on the level, the bigger the boost he gets. So he's got it at level 1, so I think he only gets really a potential boost at a very low HP, and so you're not going to be seeing that a lot. It only levels up to level 4 in Original Generations 1, which is a little unfortunate, but you can definitely level that up later and use it as something that's more of a super robot pilot skill, but it's certainly something useful and can come in handy. Potential upgrades, the lower level you get, it gives you accuracy, crit, evasion, and higher armor. So definitely a useful skill. Overall, I mentioned it a little bit, Ryusei can be not dealing as much damage and not as good of an enemy phaser as you would like him to be as a main character. He is very evasive, which means he's pretty easy to keep alive, especially if you're using focus every turn once you get him SP regen, and he's only going to be losing 5 points because of that. But overall, beyond that, Ryusei has really good stats and has a pretty good personal mech, and so he's going to be in pretty darn good shape. We'll talk a little bit more about what mechs I would put him in this opening of the Ryusei route. But overall, unfortunately, Ryusei isn't going to be your best unit, maybe until the very end of the game on Ryusei route, but he's certainly never going to be below probably in your top 7. And so overall, Ryusei is a really good unit. You're definitely going to be wanting to use him because he's going to be needing 50 kills by scenario 26. That's the opposite of a big ask. You're going to be able to get that very easy. There's quite a few map opportunities where you can feed him a lot of kills, and so overall that's just some things to think about. But yeah, Ryusei is a really solid main character and will be consistently good throughout the entire game. So this is going to be a pretty story-heavy map once again. Right now, as you can see, I'm just checking the terrain. As you can see, that stadium right there has a really big terrain bonus, so we're going to set ourselves right there, give us the best chance to survive these coming enemies, because this mech isn't very bulky. We'll go over this mech in a future map as it's not fully leveled out yet here, but as you can see here, as I'm about to attack, not at 100% accuracy, so I'm going to use Focus. That gives you a 30% boost to your accuracy and evasion, and we're going to use that to attack this bug here.
のままじゃ済まさねえぞ。
So as you saw there, these bugs came on top of us and then got into one range, which isn't best because then all we have to attack is the split missiles instead of the Mega Beam Launcher. And so we're moving out again here just to get out of the way to hit this guy with the Mega Beam Launcher, and we're hoping to kill him here. And so with the defeat of that enemy there, that sets us up pretty much perfectly. We've got 118 will, and so we should be able to take out these two mechs. Of course, they attacked us on enemy phase, so they're very low on HP. Even if they get up close and attack us with up close, the split missiles will still take them out. And so that's just kind of the main thing that you got to do on this map, is get yourself some distance so that you can get kills quicker and hit with your Mega Beam rifle. You probably are fine to just use the split missiles, but it's probably not as accurate. You're going to need some crits as well, and just you're better off going on to the arena to get those bonuses. But that will do it for Scenario 2. Pretty easy second map and a much better tutorial map, but we'll get to the story now here.